Formed in 1973, the Kenya Pipeline Company has become one of the wealthiest state entities in the Republic of Kenya, with a turnover of about 31 billion shillings. According to the last audited accounts of 2019, the company has become an envy of many public institutions. But behind the rosy figures, there's always controversy. Tonight on Inside Government, we are joined by John Gumi. He is the chairman of Kenya Pipeline Company. He's going to explain to us what measures he's taking place or he's putting in place together with his board to try and turn around and make this company more professionally managed. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Very good. Tell me things, I mean, you know, transitioning from investment banker to the chairman of Kenya Pipeline Company, which is in the energy sector, has the transition been smooth for you?
It's been interesting. It's been a mix of the expected and unexpected. I've been involved with parastatals both as a banker to parastatals and as a member of boards of parastatals right from my 20s when I was working for one of the banks in Nairobi. And it's been it's one thing, obviously, to work a parastatal from the outside as a banker, and it's another thing to work a parastatal as a director. But I can tell you, it is quite something else to be a chair of a parastatal like Kenya Pipeline.
Like Kenya Pipeline?
I was a inaugural chair of Konza.
Yes, Konza Technopolis.
Technopolis, but that was a startup.
Yeah.
And a startup has different characteristics. You're actually involved in creating the culture, the practices, and so on that come out of that place. Mm-hmm. Kenya Pipeline is a company that's been around officially since 73 and operationally since 78, and has deep-rooted ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is a very unique management style or organizational style of Kenya Pipeline Company as opposed to other institutions that you have served?
Oh no, all state companies are very different from private companies where I came from.
Yeah.
The number of actors who are involved in you are a lot. In a private company, you've got, obviously, you have your shareholders, you have your board, you have your auditors, internal and external. In a parastatal, you have all those, plus parliament, media, various entities, either investigation or oversight. Mm-hmm. You have the ministry, you have the treasury. There are a lot of institutions who have different and differing mandates, and who then are involved with you, coming at you from the different directions. So those who think that being on a parastatal board, especially being a chair of such a board, is a walk in the park, it is not.
It is absolutely not.
It is not.
And you took up this job knowing too well that it was not a walk in the park,
and
especially for KPC.
And it's a bit more than that. Mm-hmm. In the past, the philosophy, so to speak, was that the board was there to provide, overall governance. That hasn't changed. What has changed is that there is far more responsibility on the board, far more accountability on the board, and quite frankly, far more risk, personal risk to board members, as those board members of various parastatals, including Kenya Pipeline, will attest to, mm-hmm. who've had to account for their decisions at places like the DCI or EACC. There is far more risk, far more responsibility, far more public and legislative scrutiny, far more intrusiveness by the media, if I may say so, and almost an instinctive reaction on the media's part to believe that everything is bad unless proven otherwise.
You know, one of the contested issues that has that has dodged you know, KPC between the management and the board was the Kiboko spillage.
The issues that have been happening are not between the board and management. It's been between other stakeholders, whether residents or other regulatory authorities or parliament, regarding A, why it happened, B, what have we done about it, C, who is responsible. And I'd like to think that KPC has been very responsible. We first of all stopped it. We stopped the leakage. Then we worked with independent parties, the University of Nairobi, Bureau Veritas, government chemists, NEMA, you name them, to test the waters over several months, every week, independently, because the principal claim was that the water had been contaminated.
You know, if I can contest your argument, I mean, if I was to take you back to the year, you know, 2016, when the former CEO appeared before the Environmental Committee of Parliament, I mean, he said the management was somehow, they had their hands tied because there was something they wanted to procure that would have stopped or monitored the operations of the pipeline, but the procurement process was stopped by the board.
No. The saga of leak detection and SCADA, which is what you are describing.
No, I know SCADA, and I know the leakage, the Kiboko leakage.
Are very different issues. And those issues are issues which are currently issues where we are addressing in Parliament. Suffice to say that the board does not engage in procurement, and we did not engage in procurement. The board asks questions, and we asked questions. But the reason why the procurement did not take place has nothing to do with the board, has everything to do with the procurement process, the appeals by various parties to the regulatory authorities, to the High Court, the stoppage, the starting. So those are very, very different, and that is for line 5. Those are issues that will come out very clearly when Parliament concludes its investigations. But to come back to Kiboko, there was a leakage. It was stopped. There was an allegation, a major allegation, that water was contaminated. We did two things. We supplied water to the residents every day as we engaged with independent parties to test the water. And the culmination of that process is that in November, the water was declared by the Water Resource Authority, the legally and statutorily mandated body, as safe for human consumption. But we did not, we had to supply water, and even when it was declared, we continued supplying water for some time after that in order to enable a smooth transition back to normality.
And now everything is back to normal.
In terms of water consumption, yes. I am absolutely certain that there will be people who will say, no, you must continue giving water, you must do this, you must. Those things will happen. And as a public body, those are expected. So whether it is remediation or we lost income or we did this, we did that, those are things that will be managed by management because that is part of our role to be good corporate citizens. But the point is that we did what had to be done to stop the leak and also ensure that water in that area, especially Kiboko Springs, water for human consumption was safe.
You know, in the last 10 years, you know, from 2009 from 2010 to the year 2020, I mean, the organization has seen almost 8 CEOs, you know, coming and going. How has these affected the day-to-day running and, you know, the continuation of management of the company?
I think, first, I can't speak for the past. I came on the board in
May 2015.
May 2015.
Yeah.
In May 2015, there was an acting CEO who was succeeded by another acting CEO until April 2016, when we got a substantive CEO in place, who stayed in office. His term ended in April 2019.
Mr. Joe Sang.
Mr. Joe Sang, although he left, or rather he vacated the office earlier in December 2018. Since then, we've had two acting chief executives, one whose term ended on the 1st of January, and the other one who's
Hadison Andambi.
Hadison Andambi, and the other Mr. Disterius Andambi, Mr. Disterius Nyandika, who is the current acting MD. We recruited and duly appointed a substantive MD, but there has been a legal challenge to that. So until the legal challenge is resolved, we cannot have a substantive MD. We are hoping that by early March, we will have a way forward on that. I don't think that that's many. We've had, in that period of 5 years, we've actually only had one substantive MD. The others have been acting MDs because of circumstances beyond Kenya Pipeline. Not because of what the board has done, but because of action taken by other bodies which have left us with no choice but to recruit or to have in place an acting MD. So I don't think the turnover question is entirely correct. I agree that there have been a lot of bodies, 5 to be precise, who have occupied the office of MD in Kenya Pipeline since I went there 5 years ago. But of those, only one has been a substantive MD.
Have been substantive. But let me ask you this, for a company, and with all due respect, you being an accomplished investment banker, and having worked in the private sector, for more than 30 years, for an institution that would have CEOs, about 7 CEOs in a span of 10 years, would you say this is good management practice?
It's not good at all. And it is, if it was the board's choice, we would have stability. But I told you earlier, we have other stakeholders, we have things that happen, we have action that is taken by those stakeholders in reaction to what has happened. If that happens, we have no choice but to make the best of that situation. This is one. 2, in a private company, you would probably have an MD in waiting. You pretty much know who will be the next MD if this CEO leaves.
There's always succession plan.
There's a succession plan. And even if you have to go through a recruitment process, it'll be pretty quick. And because you know when the CEO is leaving, it is rare. It happens. But it is rare that you don't know or you stay for time without a takeover. In the public sector, the first point to remember is that by law, every CEO must be competitively recruited. Now, you will say, fine, 6 months from the end of a CEO's tenure that the CEO is going in 6 months, and therefore you ought to start the process early, so there's a seamless transition. So it isn't as though we've been waiting. We began in July. We had our first process that did not come up with a sufficient number of candidates to take forward for interview. We had a second process. We finished in November. We appointed the new CEO on December the 2nd, to be precise. But we are still waiting. So those extraneous circumstances, which you don't see in the private sector, those are there. So what you ought actually to be doing is to commend the board for being able to ride these waves, these explosions, these changes. Actually, boards should be commended for keeping their eye on the ball and ensuring that KPC, in this case, continues to deliver on its mandate despite the management ructions happening. So the management ructions are not good. But, hurricanes happen and storms happen. You don't cast your hands up and say, I'm helpless. You ride the storm, you ride the hurricane, you come out on the other side.
That's why there's something we call PLAN, plan. And somebody said that by failing to plan, you're planning to fail.
The circumstances are such that what you can do is put in place robust enough systems such that even the major disruption that took place in December 2018, you are able to deal with that issue without affecting the bigger picture of whether the company will shut down tomorrow or it will keep operating.
What is so hard about managing Kenya Pipeline Company? Why do most CEOs, end up with scandals in their hands?
Any organization which is big, which has lots and lots of cash flow going through it, which is also a big buyer of things, which human temptation, and that's why you've got checks and balances and controls and manuals and oversight and investigative bodies. The temptation to take advantage of position is human. It will always happen. Now, you may ask, okay, you've got bigger companies, Safaricom is big. How come the CEOs of Safaricom haven't been arrested? You've got other companies. Because, again, I suppose the answer is that the way the system reacts in private sector is quicker and probably more brutal in clamping on wrongdoing. The public sector system is a public sector system. It is what it is. It has to go through all those motions, show cause, do this, do that. We can't avoid them. What you can do, and what we've been working away very diligently over 5 years, is to strengthen the controls with the objective being, since the system, the remedial system, takes time, try and not arrive at that in the first place. So have sufficiently robust controls which will stop the wrongdoing happening, or have an openness to the media, because the media, I may not be your biggest fan many times, but the media also plays a role in exposing this. I may not quite like the idea of having to make statements to the DCI or EACC or any other, or to give evidence in court, but just the existence of those possibilities also act as checks and balances.
These management hurricanes, if I may call so, how have they hindered the smooth operations of the company? Do you think they have by any means?
Well, if by smooth operations you mean, has our core mandate been affected? We are still producing. You drove to work today. I think in the 5 years I have been on the board, other than at the beginning of my tenure, I cannot recall that there has been a shortage of petroleum. So that core mandate is still being fulfilled.
What about the expansion of infrastructure?
We've done a tremendous amount of expansion of infrastructure. When I joined, underway were Line 5, which cost about 50 billion and change. There was additional tanks in Nairobi, which cost 55.3 billion. There was
construction of oil jetty Kisumu.
Oil jetty in Kisumu, which cost 2 billion, which started during my term. There was the bottom loading, which is very important. You may ask why we call it bottom loading, but without going into the intricacies, instead of loading tankers from the top, you load from the bottom. That has 3 impacts. 1, speed of loading is better. 2, it's environmentally and health-wise better. There are no fumes coming up to affect the operator at the top. And 3, touch wood, it is impossible for anybody other than the owner of the tanker to open. So adulteration is a thing of the past. So what we are doing now is that any new pump station we build are all bottom loading. So there were those projects, there were other projects. I think we have put on in assets pretty much close to 90, 100 billion in 5 years. That is not small.
That's an average of 20 billion shillings every year.
Furthermore, other than the loan that Kenya Pipeline took in 2015 of 35 billion to repay, to fund
Line 5.
part of the cost of Line 5, it funded 70%, 30% came from KPC. Other than that loan, KPC has no loans. All that infrastructure plus everything else we are doing has been funded from within.
Since the completion of the new line, you know, from Mombasa to Nairobi, what plans are there for the old line?
Line 5 was actually the first of a three-phase expansion. We are using Line 5 to transport diesel and petrol. We are using Line 1 to transport aviation fuel.
Jet fuel.
That's what we are doing. We reduced the capacity, the throughput for Line 1 by half, which reduces the stress on the old pipeline. But what will also interest you.
So Line 1 is doing about 300,000.
It's doing 400 cubes, which is 400,000 liters an hour.
An hour.
Line 5, the new one, is doing 1,000 cubes, which is 1,000,000 liters an hour.
An hour.
It may interest you to know that despite all that, our power bill has come down from an average of 250 million a month to 120 to 140 million a month. Those are efficiencies, again, done by those same Kenyans.
And, you know, in the interest of time, because I can see time is really against us, tell me this, you know, what is the role of KPC in the new Kenya where the country is now an oil-producing nation?
KPC today transports products, refined products brought into the country. What you're talking about is the exploitation and transportation of crude oil.
Yeah.
That's a different area. What we are talking with government, and I believe it will be the case, will be that the government's stake in the pipeline that will transport products
from Leakage to
Lamu will be held by KPC, because we have the expertise, because we have the money,
so the government's stake,
or can raise the money. Everything we do is on behalf of the government. So the government will decide, we want you as KPC to be our agent to hold shares in this new pipeline on our behalf. From the figures we've seen, that KPC has the capacity to come up with the money. Now, whether that's our own cash, or whether that's cash from borrowing on the balance sheet of KPC, that is a different issue altogether. But just to leave you with a figure, when Kenya government asked 8 parastatals to come up with a special dividend, we came up with 10 billion. So we can, I think we have the ability to generate the cash. We are, this year alone, we reduced our admin and operating expenses by 14%. We are actually driving efficiency very, very hard. And all this time, we are also supporting Kenya Petroleum Refineries, where we meet all the expenses.
As we end up this interview, tell me things. I mean, Nigeria, which is the largest oil producer in Africa and the 7th largest in the world, it's always experiencing a fuel shortage, despite the fact that they produce a lot of oil. I want to find out, or somebody may be asking somewhere, I mean, how comes Kenya, which imports all its oil, doesn't face the same challenges? And when are we expecting the operationalization of the Kisumu oil jetty?
Okay. In terms of on why no fuel shortages, I think Kenya, with industry as a whole, must be pat itself on the back. We have what's called an OTS system, which ensures that there's an orderly planning of imports. We've got a pipeline, a white products distribution transportation system in Kenya Pipeline, which ensures that the product moves from Mombasa to the rest of the country and on to the region. Kisumu is a long-term project. Kisumu's rationale remains the same. Reduce the wear and tear and cost and environmental degradation and accidents and hospital costs that come with transporting fuel by truck by doing what the rest of the world does. Use water. 90% of the world's trade, of the world's goods are on water. Sea, river, a lake. So all we are waiting for is for Uganda to finish its part, because you can load product in Kisumu, but the product has to be offloaded somewhere. In March, we are having a team from Kenya Pipeline, which will go to Uganda at the invitation of the Ugandans, and hopefully we will be able to say, I hope that we now have a definitive date, which we hope is in 2020. Kisumu oil jetty will start working.
Right. Chairman, thank you so very much indeed for joining us tonight on Inside Government.
Asante sana.
And all the best at KPC.
Asante sana tena.
Very good. John Gumi is the chair of Kenya Pipeline Company, joining us tonight to discuss more about what's happening at KPC. You have heard it from him, definitely a tough assignment. Thank you so much indeed for your time. This has been Inside Government. We'll do this again on Thursday next week. Until then, enjoy the rest of the programming right here on KBC Channel 1.